Welcome back, everybody, to I'm super excited. I'm exhausted. We've been in Calgary all week for Energy Tech Night. Big shout out to Saga Wisdom and everybody that attended. Appreciate the hat.
Yeah, wish I could have been there. It seemed like a good time.
It was a great time. Calgary and was it Canmore where we went yesterday? We woke up at like 5 yesterday morning and drove out to basically close to Banff just to see it because we were all there, and absolutely worth it. It's beautiful. Not fun returning to the 90-degree Houston weather today, but
the Beltway's beautiful. Watching it like intersect over I-10.
It is weird when you fly into Houston. You don't realize how green and how many trees and stuff there are in Houston and the metro area and stuff. And I was like, oh, we do have some nice things down here.
It feels like a concrete
jungle. Here with Bobby Nealon, my trusty co-host.
What's good?
Good. And today I'm super excited. I've been a customer of Energy Ogre since 2017, I believe, or 18. I guess an OG now, but
OG Ogre.
So yeah, we're here with Britany Devlin, CTO at Energy Ogre. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Really excited.
We've got Bobby found a good kind of relevant news story to that around.
I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, Shaleenial, friend of Digital Wildcatters, Toby Rice, kind of came out and basically said he's bracing for sub $3 Henry Hub for foreseeable future, lower for longer. And I think there's definitely gonna be some implications for, oil and gas upstream companies, but even, downstream
on the market side too.
On the market side. So definitely want to get Brittany's take on that, and you with your energy MBA.
A lot of value I provide with that.
Yeah.
I'm like a fresh out of school MBA when it comes to energy markets. I learned all this stuff in school. I did a hedging program as one of my, strategy as one of my projects and stuff, but it's all theoretical. So yeah, it'll be fun to chat with you about.
It's been a while since I've been in the wholesale side, but it was really fun. I spent most of my career working on trading floors, doing risk management, which was really exciting. Everybody makes money when the market is volatile, and when it's not volatile and you're staying these super low prices, you have to get really creative with your storage plays and those types of things. But when it is volatile, it's a very, very exciting place to be. And a lot of money can be made.
Sure. What do you feel about the kind of gas market as a whole? Do you kind of lean into that side of it where it's going to be this kind of lower for longer thing like we've seen for the last decade?
Yeah, basically since I've been in the industry, it's like
literally
$2. Henry Hub is what you just get used to.
It is kind of what you get used to. Before it was $2 for forever. There were people saying gas was going to go to $12. I remember those days all the time when it was up, and then it just maintained this consistency. But even though you have this long, consistent, forward-looking price, as soon as there's a hurricane or a storm, everybody starts going nuts. Everybody loves, the trading floor it was either a car chase that would just captivate everybody, or it would be the hurricane coming in the storm, and let's get the meteorologist in, and what is the space weather guy saying, and those types of things.
Yeah, no, that was one of the things in my trading class that I took. We had to look at the heating days and the cooling days and all the weather events that play into it and all this stuff. And, I don't think the average oil and gas person knows that all these things go into those hedging strategies and the marketing side of things and stuff. It's crazy because it's true, right? Like an oil and gas company, they're hedging looking out months to years in advance, right? Whereas it's like, but the spot prices of these things literally change by the minute. And so, you have these potentials or these, when was that, last year or 2 years ago when natural gas went up to like $6?
Oh yeah, like $6.
For 2 months.
As a Grayson Mill Energy employee, thank you very much. That helped. We made a lot of money in those 5-6 months.
Well, hedging is just such a weird thing, right? Because it's like when prices are down, you look like a genius when you hedge, but when prices go up, you look like an idiot because you're not capitalizing on the upside. So there's this whole and my professor he had lots of hedging experience, started on the stock trading floor, for pipeline companies and midstream companies and stuff. And he's very adamant that, hedging is a fiduciary responsibility.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But then it's like, I talked to my father-in-law who has a bunch of stripper wells and stuff, and he doesn't hedge anything. Right. Yeah. And it's like very different business models. Of course, he's not publicly traded. But I mean, like that.
Even us being like private equity back, like when we were in the portion where we're having to pay back, we were required to hedge a certain amount of our
portfolio. You had
just
to hedge a certain amount of your risk just to maintain the value at risk that you have on the line.
A floor on.
And then, but there's also weird cases where you have these super long-term deals that are really valuable, but there's no liquidity to hedge them where you need to. Right, and so then it's just a constant rolling in the hedges as you can. Or just hedging with options, being long volatility, then you can be hedged and capitalize on the big gains. So it comes with a physical strategy, a financial strategy, all of that.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. But
so if natural gas prices are down, consistently all the time.
Does that mean my energy prices are going down?
Yeah. Hopefully? Yeah. Like, why am I paying more for electricity?
Well, I was looking at that trend actually. And, this isn't super technical deep dive, but I was just looking at some different trends. Over time, you used to see this really strong correlation between electricity and the natural gas price, like very, very in step. It's traded that way,
right?
As heat rates. And now you kind of see that decoupling, and I see some sort of correlation, just a vague correlation with the amount of renewables that are coming online, right? So it tells you something, but also I think people were expecting much bigger summers. We had a lot of crazy weather events this summer, and we're getting into a situation where I think I haven't looked at what it was for this August, but I remember last August there was 1 hour that averaged like $1,400 a megawatt, and throughout the day, and a normal price would be 50 or 40 even, because it wasn't even a peak hour, but it was right when the sun goes down and the wind's not blowing, and you don't have the generation online. So we're kind of seeing ourselves fall into this curve that California has with their duck curve. So that's a really interesting thing. I think as we build more, there's a lot more batteries and stuff online that's definitely making up the difference this year. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah. That's my thing, is it's like, I have no issues with renewables as long as we have storage with them, because that's
storage
that's the
and a good base load
function, right? Yeah. You have to have a base load and you have to have storage for it to work at scale, how it should theoretically work. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Of course, theory is always different than reality, but that's, no, I know there's been a lot of stories I feel like this summer, primarily around how good the batteries have performed this year.
Right. I mean, there's just so much more online.
And there's a ton in the queue.
Right. There's a ton in the queue. Right. My whole demand response thing kind of went out the window when I couldn't do the generators. And I'm looking at the batteries, and it's on, people are already all over it.
How does that, so let's get into this. So give people that don't know, hopefully most people do, because again, I've been signed up for them for 6 years now, I think. And it's fantastic. All of it stemmed from, and we were talking about this before we started, but all of it stemmed from, you go on Power to Choose in Houston, and they give you all the different prices, but the prices that they list aren't actually the prices that you pay, because power contracts are complicated. And it's, some of the contracts are, well, if you exceed the first house I had, the reason I got it, I had a pool, and, the pool pump runs all the damn time. And so I had basically had a minimum amount of electricity I was going to use every month. And when I went into Power to Choose, they list the price per kilowatt, but then you get into the contract, you have to click into every single contract. Pro tip: if you're looking at power prices, don't just go off of the base rate that is on Power to Choose.
Well, they've gotten better too. I think they have a button now, like where like it has to be
the actual
price.
Well, so some of them will be like this price up to 1,000 kilowatt hours, and then this price at 2,000.
Right.
And I only know that because February, I was on screwed. It was, if you hit 2,000, you got a discount, like an $80 discount. And it was at like 1,900 because I had the pool turned off all month and I didn't get the discount. I was like, why is my utility bill $200 when it should be like 70 at this month?
I mean, it shouldn't be that hard to calculate it. And, time of use plans, like free nights and weekends, those typically don't work out now. At some point, if this hour, it's going to become really critical to start looking at that. But at some point, if that hour is really a problem, where it's not just going to be, I can use as much electricity as I want and pay for it. At some point, you're going to be
make it up on
throttled
your regular rates. Too, right. Like you might get free nights and weekends, but your average kilowatt hour is 5% higher than what you would get on another plan or something.
Typically those don't work out.
And so that's why you guys were so like valuable when I found you because I literally had a spreadsheet. I had all my meter data, the last 2 years of meter data.
John and I will do that.
Okay.
Like, I mean, and then you have like 98% of the population who won't even
do it. Right. And then we'll get people
like, where's all these fees coming from?
Right.
And you have the center point fee that they just bumped and all of this other stuff. And you're like, oh, well, this is way more expensive than I thought it was going to be. With Energy Ogre, you put in your address. I think you have to link your smart meter. They pull in all the historic smart meter data and say, based off historic consumption, here's the best power plan for you. And then when that contract runs out, they auto renew it for the next one. And you don't have to do a damn thing. And it's so wonderful.
It is wonderful.
It's so nice. I wish there were more services like that for like across the homeowner spectrum. Like I want that for my lawn care. I want that for my home maintenance and everything. It's so nice.
You know, it's really interesting because the way I got to Energy Ogre, the original founder of Energy Ogre was worked in trading, and we kind of followed each other through the companies, but I ended up working very closely with his wife. And I worked all the time. Yeah. I was just a grinder, so many hours per day. All I was doing is crunching numbers and doing analysis all day. And the last thing I wanted to do when I got home was shop for electricity. And because of that, I was one of the last people, I think, that was on the original Reliant rate that moved over, and I was paying so much money. And Energy Ogre had just started up, so I signed up, and my bill dropped so much, more than 50%. And then I never had to do anything again. And so for me, it's more, I wasn't ever going to go and do research again after that. Just like my time is worth so much more than having to do that. And I was just wasting so much money. So for me, it was really a convenience factor. And then I was like you, everybody that I met that I talked to, I was selling Energy Ogre. I only worked here for 2.5 years, but I've been a customer for probably around 10.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan, and it's a little different. Some of the other companies that do something similar, they're owned by another retail provider or something like that. Or they take bounties from certain people, and we actually don't.
Y'all are pure third party.
Yeah. Our residential service, we don't take bounties. We get $10 a month from you. And that's it. Our fiduciary responsible
in the first month.
It pays for itself, right? And then there's, after you're with us for a while, we're constantly going out. Yeah. We also are looking when the market drops, telling you,
I just did this.
You got a market check. We're doing a lot of market checks right now.
They let you put in, hey, if you're willing to pay the cancellation fee, whatever rate that may be, what you're comfortable with, we'll notify you if there's a better deal that comes along while you're on this contract that actually makes more sense with the cancellation fee. And it did.
You'll make it.
And they switched it for me, and it is great.
Yeah, it's great. You can set it up. You don't even have to, you can set it up to approve it, or you can say, I'm comfortable if I have an extra $200 to break this contract on this bill. And to do that, I need to save $1,000 in a year. And so you can set it up and it all just happens automatically. So it's really great. I love the service. It's super cool. It does require a lot of things on the back end to get that going. It's wild, all the different technologies that we have to deal with. Yeah. Like constant change, because we're always pushing for as much automation as possible in every single part of that process, whether it's, this account has fallen into this situation and they need to we have all of these different automated emails that go through based upon things that happen. There's going through and having the different bots that we have, the different APIs that we have, the websites are constantly changing. Somebody changes the way their bill looks, and how do we handle that? So it's really fun to be exposed to all that. And it's really fast paced, which we all really like.
Yeah. So no one likes slow stuff.
So let's get into like some, because you guys are ingesting data from probably all different angles, right? You're getting smart meter data from houses, and even the frequency you're getting that. Do y'all do houses and businesses too, or
we do commercial businesses. That setup's a little bit different. It's a smaller part of our business that I think we'd look to expand. But for the most part, when I'm talking about things that I'm generally talking about the residential, the commercial market's a little bit different. Yeah. They have a lot of brokers in that market. So, but the majority of our clients now, at least, are residential. And so, we get the smart meter data 12 different ways every day. We have everybody's meter data for every 15 minutes for a decade.
That's a lot.
I mean, I don't want to say a decade. I mean, a lot of what we've done to increase the automations, if you get the smart meter information, we can automate a lot of stuff that happens based upon that. That's kind of the best source of data. So for me, it's looking at the data, trying to figure out, do I want to feed this model the 15-minute data, or does it make more sense to feed it the monthly data? In this case, all the different use cases for the data, but typically that's the easiest way for us to automate the picking the plan part.
Yeah.
The rest of it, the automating like of the credit cards, and do you want us to send you a bill, and the switching and the enrolling, and that is a wild situation. I was going to say as well.
That's as someone who has done not a lot, but a decent amount of web app and front end stuff. I do not envy. So like it's not like, hey, we're giving you a new plan. Here's a link. You go put in all the information. They literally do everything.
Yeah. Like the auto pay and everything. So I remember when I came into Energy Ogre, I'm not the person that's doing the spreadsheet and all the stuff. I am the person that will never pick up the phone. I think I even paid for it for a few months. They didn't have access to my account because I had changed my credentials on accident. And eventually I called in. So I had to call once. Or I had to go into my portal once and change something. And then I had a credit card expire one time that I had to update. And other than that, in 10 years, I don't think I ever called. Awesome. So I'm the dream customer for somebody that's in automations, right? Yeah. You're not going to be calling.
That's that most people don't like. I don't want to pick up the phone and have to sit on hold like that. Just the thought of calling into a company gives me all this anxiety because of all the bad experiences you've had on a call with somebody. That's another thing that I love about you guys is y'all have a ton of focus on technology. It's like, if I need someone, I can email them, I can get on the chat.
There's so many different ways. Available. Like we're trying to make it as much as possible. I mean, in addition to keeping and maintaining our automations that we have and increasing that in any way we can in any step of the process, it's also how do we reduce calls in our call center?
Sure. Yeah.
Which is super difficult. We don't outsource our call center. We think customer service is really important. We do have people that only want to call. Yep. Right. We have people that try to sign up without an email, which it becomes almost impossible to serve them in that case. But, people will go and they'll look on Power to Choose and they'll see one of those weird time of use rates and the prices are high. And so they get mad because they don't, we have a lot of people that come back after they do that sort of thing. But the call center is always a really important part. When it surges. And people still don't totally, I think one thing that people really don't completely understand is that when you have a power outage, it's not the retail company that you have to call. It's not us. So we have to, we get a lot of influx of calls when there's power outages, things like that, or when the prices get high because people think that we're not there. We don't have control over any of the prices at all. So, I mean, prices can go up, which was a really hard thing because in the time I'd been at Energy Ogre, prices, because they were so correlated to natural gas, had stayed so consistent. And then all of a sudden prices doubled one year. And so we had a lot of people saying, what are you doing? I just went and
well, go do it yourself.
Well, a lot of them would come back and then, sometimes that's the only available rate is the high rate, which is why we do the market checks and things like that. Yeah. And we also have,
that's like, am I going back and checking the rates on a daily or monthly, weekly basis? No, I'm not at all. And I'd have no desire to do that, to go rebuild my spreadsheet that I initially did to figure all this stuff out.
How much does the customer service of like the retailer matter? Cause I mean, like I guess you go on Power Choose and some get better ratings than other. I mean, like I've never really cared as long as I can pay them and
it doesn't, I mean, so for us internally it matters, but we're not going by those ratings. We can automate more if we have an API with a certain retail provider, or if somebody plays nice with us. Sometimes people love us and other time people don't love us because we'll have,
if you're pulling people off of them, or
if we pull people off of them, it's a bunch, in once, and we try to negotiate with them. A lot of times we can get custom rates through those negotiations, which is great that you wouldn't see on Power to Choose. We'll show them a block of a bunch of usage.
And was that always, so when I initially joined, that was one of the things I thought like longer term, like this would be a perfect, once you guys hit a certain scale or critical mass, like you guys now have the ability to turn around and negotiate.
We do a lot of negotiation.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's really, there's David, our COO, and his team, they have really great relationships with the REPs. And so as far as, is one REP better than the other? if you're using their website and calling in to self-service your account with them, probably yes. But if you're using Energy Ogre, it really doesn't matter because you never know.
It's all coming from CenterPoint anyways.
Right. It's all coming from CenterPoint or Encore. So it doesn't really matter. I mean, there is another, I guess, like risk to that is, which we handle this too. It's not fun, but we've done it a million times now with all the mergers and these companies going out of business constantly. There's moving these people over to this rep or trying to figure out where these people go so that they get a better rate than if they go Polar.
Right. Yeah. And do people have the option within Energy Ogre to say, I only want 100% renewable, even though it's all,
I know we do have the option. Some people care about it. They want 100% renewable. We had one guy, I think if you call in, there's certain things that you can do. If you don't like a certain provider, you can call in and let us know. But yes, we do offer that option, even though most of them are 100% renewable anyway. We did have one complaint from somebody one time because we put him in a renewable plan because it was the best price, and he was very anti-renewables.
Just
and I'm like, really, it's probably just a REC credit. You know, it's just another.
But to then, can you even really talk about you can't control which electrons are coming from?
No,
it's just like this company is saying that.
Well, it's 100% renewable. No, there's a whole other trading market for REC credits that a company, maybe like a coal producer, has to buy them so that they don't have to upgrade their technology on the emissions. So the people that don't need it go out and sell it. And so a company that, I mean, it's an electron, right? You can't tell where it's coming from. You can't tag it like a molecule. Going to the same
transmission lines. If my neighbor's got 100%, I want 100% coal, then you're 100%, they can't, fork these electrons around each other to say,
you can. And like, there's so much incentive for these larger companies to buy the REC credit to offset their all the ESG that they can get with whatever their corporate structure is and whatever funding they have. A lot of times you can get better rates if you have some sort of ESG score, which is really, a really easy way to hit that is to buy one of these super cheap renewable energy credits.
No, I mean, that's the
one and done.
The energy credit just like concept is not, new for renewables, right? They did this with ethanol. They do it with a lot. And it's kind of, I don't know, I'm very torn on how that whole work. To me, it's like very well intentioned, but just like every other law and bill, but then there's all these secondary and tertiary consequences that weren't thought about that this would create. It's like, oh man, now you have a REC market where people are just buying and selling these things.
We had a whole REC desk on the trading floor, which was wild because for forever, I mean, there's different things that we needed it for. And then we had our own trading desk. And then eventually I know that for C&I customers, it was a big thing. We were trying to have this is green gas. But at one point, a company that was backing us was a European company and it was really big on ESG. And so they wanted me to go through every trade that we had and figure out if it was green or brown. God. And I'm like, oh God, this is just going to be so hard because how do I do this? Is it interstate versus intrastate pipelines? Like what, I can maybe group it like this. And it was just wild because in this calculation at one iteration of it that they were asking it, crude oil was green, right? It was just wild. They didn't want,
if it's a point in time thing where
right. They didn't want the shale gas in there, which is really hard to say. And then it just became this numbers game. But I had this environmental book, which had been underwater millions of dollars for. I'm like, so as this, do I get to offset this with my renewable book that's been losing money? That's all changed
the
now.
Carbon footprint. It's like
with the ESG resolution.
By what metric are you green?
Right.
Well, I'm curious. Will you unpack not personal, but consumer energy markets, right? So I have my house in Katy. CenterPoint owns the transmission lines. So and basically everyone pays CenterPoint, or who does the north
That's
side?
the TDSP. Encore is more Dallas area. There's AEP and
so there's
TNMP.
all these energy infrastructure provider, or it's utility infrastructure, I guess is the right word, right? And then you have all these utility companies that have power, but in most cases, some of those do generate power. Most of them do not. Is that accurate?
Well, you have the big energy companies, they have power plants, right? That ultimately will bid into ERCOT, right? And then it'll be on the wholesale market for people to sell, and they do their hedging there. And then ultimately that supply goes through the transmission lines, and a retail provider will have their own deals on the other end.
Kind of broker the routing of the electrons, essentially, right? Once they get to that point.
Yeah, they just buy and sell it at a specific spot.
Yeah. So I think that's a whole nother thing, right? Where it's like in my master's program, one of the things that came up was, actually one of the guys that was in my class worked for Duke and on their legal side, but he was like, the whole problem with distributed generation and utilities paying people for their power generation on their homes and stuff is like, that's not how those businesses are set up. Yeah. They're not set up for money to go out. But also he did make a good point that the issue with it is that, yes, they're generating back to the grid, but they're also not paying to maintain any of the infrastructure. So then it's like, okay, well, how do they put their share in? And the whole distributed thing is really fascinating because there's very different incentives, misalignments in some areas and stuff like that. But the theoretical possibility of it is crazy, right? Like if everybody had a battery in their house and you could intelligently distribute the load to the batteries when you I've done such a deep dive on that in the past. I mean, I'm so brokenhearted. We really wanted to have this generator program where, it's really hard to get a residential person to buy a battery that's going to be $20,000 all in, that if Uri happened wouldn't last you very long, or the two giant events that have happened in the last 6 months wouldn't get you through it. When I lost power for 8 days one of the times and 7 days another.
But could they be more strategic about say rolling blackouts if they knew all right, we can say we're going to shut down this part of the grid, but if everyone had these batteries, it could last 2 hours or whatever.
For sure. I think there's lots of
still have the lights on, but you could kind of distribute the load different ways.
You could, and I think there's different initiatives. Like, where does that happen? Does it happen in person's home or somewhere else, or some people buying battery plants? But for the individual consumer, if you're not getting electricity, most of these people would love to have a generator, would be super happy to pay $20,000 for a generator. I got one as part of this experiment that we were doing. We were working pretty closely with Generac to try to be able to remote turn on these generators and test them out, so that instead of it just coming on when the power goes down, we'd be able to turn it on and shift the load to the generator in peak hours where the electricity gets very expensive. Right. Yeah. And so if you add that up, you have a bunch of people that are perfectly willing to buy a generator. You could probably negotiate a much cheaper rate for them with the REP, because they're not going to need to hedge that weird part that might happen. So ultimately it was shot down because the Texas Administrative Code, I think, kind of unintentionally has language in it that makes the emission standards for running a generator in this way more strict than the EPA.
Okay.
That's fascinating.
It's wild.
But then I could go buy, I've actually, after the last one, I started looking, I was like, I just need to get a portable one. But it's like, I can go buy a portable one for $1,500, pay a guy a few $100 to set up there.
The beauty of
plug it in. And then it's like, but there's no emission issue there.
There's not.
And
it's really
some of the least efficient motors,
horrible emission wise, right? The 2-stroke motors.
It is. Ultimately the issue was it's like for the standby generators and when you can operate them for non-emergency use and whether that requires a permit or not.
Okay, interesting.
So the language was more around CNI type situations. They weren't imagining this. And so I think ERCOT has a pilot program where you could probably do something like this. I haven't followed it that much because I think they may pay for it. You get money back through the ancillary services market or some of those other markets that they're controlled by ERCOT. But ERCOT is just such. I have PTSD from Uri on the trading floor in ERCOT and what was going on there. So to me, the simplicity of I could negotiate with a retail provider, say I have this person and they can do this, just give them a cheaper rate, and I'll let you deal with the ERCOT part of that situation. Yeah. But it was hard also to bridge the gap between what a retail price is and what a wholesale price is.
Sure.
So
I think the like interesting possibility there, right, is it's the incentive. Like, how do you incentivize the homeowner to one, I think the first one, which I've noticed, and it's directly through my thermostat provider, where it's like, hey, sign up for this program and we'll adjust your AC when there's issues. And I'm like, I have no incentive to do that.
Right.
Because there is no incentive. Like there's literally
you're
no
going to crank my house
other
to 77 and I'm going to.
Yeah. And then the power's still going to go out and I'm going to sleep like shit anyway. And it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
So it's like, but if you flipped it and said, hey, just like the regular retail or, retail market for power is, where it's like, hey, if you add load when demand is super high, you get paid in that rate, like the Bitcoin miners and everybody else that does the demand response. Like it is demand response. It's the exact same thing.
It is. We started out looking at that and then I think we quickly came to the conclusion that people are going to get really pissed off if you jack with their air conditioning.
Yeah. Right. But also, if you flip it and say, I'm going to pay you if you turn your generator on, right. Or I'll credit you against your utility bill.
Like you let me run your generator 50 hours out of the year, or just have the option to, and I'm going to save you 20% on your electricity for the entire year. Yeah. Right. And then there's so much more money because the hedging instrument that would be required to hedge that weird hour that these residential people could do themselves. Yeah. It's coming from the big banks all the way down, with credit costs all the way down, transaction costs. Like there's so much money being made for that type of optionality. And to me, being an Energy Ogre employee now, I want to put it back in the customer's hands when I can.
Well, and again, it's like the theory of the distributed load stuff makes a lot of sense, but you have to, human incentive is the other component of those things. That it's like, if the only incentive for me to sign up for a program is that my AC is going to be hot when I come home, it's going to be off when I come home when there's demand peaks, that's not a lot of incentive. Yeah. But if you, or even like, hey, if we bump your utility or your thermostat, we'll credit you some costs because we did like something.
Right. It's just also kind of a hidden cost because you know what, as soon as you try to crank your air conditioning down, not during that hour, you're going to be taking a lot more energy to get it cool. So there's not a lot of like juice for the squeeze there for me. Yeah. We looked at, pool pumps or having this whole home system where we could just put this in low mode and get these smart devices for your, dryer or your water heater, those types of things. And they've done some of these programs successfully in California, but in the deregulated market, there's just nothing really incentivizing people. And there's nothing that cracks me up more when I hear ERCOT making an announcement that says, hey, everybody can just turn your air conditioning on. This is a really critical day for us.
Well, they don't realize that everyone goes and turns it down 2 degrees. Because
it's going to go down. Better get as much as I can.
Exactly.
It's funny. You bring up the thermostats though. And I think I've brought it up in here before, but I remember it was a couple of years ago, something came out because with all the smart thermostats now that again, people they set them, I want it to crank on at 6 a.m. or I want it to crank at 4 p.m. Like, so then everyone's comes on at the same time. And even just that, I mean, everyone's AC kicking on at exactly like 4 p.m. or whatever it is before people get home at 5, like it like pulls on the system really hard. And like, that's where you're talking earlier, even about you'd say the duck curve or something like that. But again, the sun's going down, everyone's coming home. Like now everyone's using more energy.
And the sun just went down. The wind is not blowing at all. Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think again, the average person doesn't realize that the power grid isn't just a flat line. It's this crazy up, down during the day, back up. And then like a lot of people don't realize too, that power generators produce during the night, even when there isn't demand.
Right. I mean, a lot of times
cheaper to do that than to shut it down for an hour or 2 just to bring it back up.
Right. It takes hours to bring them back online.
The whole baseload thing is just such just no one talks about it. So the average person has no clue. Right.
Right.
How about some of those credits for nuclear? Because
I wrote a letter. It was to Houston Lighting and Power. I'd learned about, I think it's the South Texas project. When I think it was 8 or something. And I wrote a letter. I was really young. It was right when, this was early 80s. And so I wrote a letter that it's too much if one person can die. I think I saw something about, Chernobyl or something like that. And so I wrote this letter and, they wrote me back and they were like, actually, they actually wrote me back and said the whole thing about why it's better. And so I'd grown up thinking that nuclear was this terrible thing. And then I worked at Dynegy, which got me exposed to the nuclear and coal and all these different markets that do exist. And I found out how cheap nuclear was. So this letter that I got back from them, it was signed And my mom kept it for me.
That's awesome.
And then I found out, I was telling somebody this story at Dynegy, who's the head of investor relations. And he's actually the guy that wrote that letter.
No way.
Yeah. He
That's
was like,
awesome.
this is signed by my boss at the time, but I know that I wrote that.
That's wild.
Isn't that crazy?
That's
and then I
cool.
became, nuclear. It's sad. There's actually some new nuclear technology, the pebbling that's coming out, which seems really interesting. I mean, I'm a huge Star Trek fan. I'm a total physics nerd. And so there's a part of me, it's dangerous to have a nuclear market, for instance. But I mean, really the way into the future, it is the most cost effective.
It's crazy to me that we've regulated it out of existence basically in the United States.
Right.
That was another project I did in my master's was the I can't remember the name of the generator. It was the last one that the TVA brought on I grew up in Memphis, so TVA was interesting. But yeah, the plans for it started in the 80s and they didn't bring it on until like late 2000s.
Right.
And it was, 3 or 4 times over budget, 20 years late, all this crazy stuff. And it's like, you look at the timeline and it's like, oh, well, I'm making up numbers, but in 1989, they added this new regulation. And in 1994, they added, and so you can see where it's like, oh, well, they had to stop and redo everything at this point and then do it again and again. And then you look at like international markets where they have these modular standardized designs. And like, why the hell aren't we doing this? Yeah. Like Southwest uses the same plane on everything because it makes sense. It makes the logistics, the scale, the supply chain, everything. Why are we custom designing nuclear reactors?
It's just wild because like the people that already are 25 years into their permitting and their cycle of getting whatever project they have online that's been abandoned so many times now, like they would have to really, all the money is just sunk now because right. There's no way. It'll be interesting. I think it'll
with
get
automation and everything, they're safer than ever.
Well, they've always been safe though. That's the crazy part.
No, for sure. But you bring up the South Texas project. So it was during Uri, like it actually shut itself down because there was freezing in the lines. So I mean, like it did what it was supposed to do. Right. It came offline. But then, I mean, to point to the power of the nuclear, like when it came back on, like ton of the grid came back on too. Like it's a huge portion.
It's huge. It's just a massive amount of energy. Yeah. There's a whole like technology and society curve. The technology curve is exponential, and as the thing that's going to end civilization or not is whether we can handle the technology that we have, whether these are guns or now we have nuclear weapons. And so once we get past that nuclear,
it's going to be wild.
Then it's going to be Star Trek.
I was talking to my COO at Grayson Mill, Blake, and he likes to think about a lot of things, really sharp dude. And he was talking about, I forget what the metal is, but like, I mean, we've been using uranium because that's what they use for weapons. But I think there's some other of those metals that are actually better for like, say, commercial power generation, like that, would actually burn more efficiently or be a better source. But like people need to be able to invest in that and not think that this is a fool's errand because I'm going to burn 15 years just on regulatory things before I can implement this technology.
Like in the amount of money that you have to put together to even start something like that with just I don't think it's not a great environment for people to want to invest in those projects. But this new technology that they have, it really prevents some of the problems that have occurred in the past with like the reactors melting down because it gets too hot.
And like, let's not forget too that the 3 Mile and Chernobyl were both human error. They weren't like the system did what it was supposed to do and the humans screwed it up. And so it's like, and that was what, 30, 40, I mean, more than that, right? Like imagine how much more innovation we have.
They didn't even have microchips.
Right. Like, I mean, and so, I think it's absolutely crazy on the nuke side that it has just been so crushed from a regulation perspective.
Politician, I mean, like if a presidential candidate just came out and said like, we're going to build 8 nukes, like, and, I'm going to make it easier to do, but like, here's how many jobs and here's how much cleaner the energy, like you could get people on both sides on board with that, I think.
For sure. No, that's the biggest problem.
If you could get people to overcome their fear, but if you educated and then just said like, here's, 100,000 jobs and whatever.
It's going to reduce our carbon emissions for this much for the next 50 years.
Yeah. I mean, it would totally upend all the commodity market.
It truly would. I think in my policy class though, that was one of the really like fascinating things about energy policy, looking at it internationally, globally, right? Is that the US, we kind of screw ourselves because basically every 2 to 4 years, whether it's state or federal, you have new people potentially coming in. And it's like, well, if you're China and you have the same government for 20 years, you can actually plan 20-year energy projects and implement them because the next guy, there's not a next guy coming in. It's just you. And so the next guy who comes in doesn't have a different agenda and cancels all your stuff. And so that's it. I truly see that as like almost it's a weak point for the U.S. energy like policy as a whole.
Absolutely.
Because you can't, everything is always going to be changing. So then from an investor perspective, regardless of whether it's renewable, solar, nuclear, coal, natural gas, one of the biggest things they teach you when you're doing those projects is you have to go through and look at the political, the environmental, all these risks. And then it's like, if it's going to take you 5 years to do permits and then another 5 years to design,
right? And like the incentives
are being, you start building,
right? And then the incentives and the laws are written by people that have no idea about.
And they're constantly changing, right?
Well, it's like people used to say, what is the impact going to have that we're not aligned with the rest of the world on ESG? And to me, and what I'd seen in my experience in the energy industry is that it's almost that didn't matter in the commodities industry because we are so intertwined with these international companies that are going to require it anyway. And regardless of how you feel about renewables in general, or climate change or whatever, it does come with new technology and building efficiencies as a whole, looking at things a little bit differently.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So pivoting back a little bit more on Energy Ogre, are you guys exclusively in the Houston market, or do you?
We're throughout Texas, wherever you're deregulated. So ERCOT. Okay. Deregulated ERCOT.
Okay. So now, like, say from like a data standpoint, you're talking about these APIs. Like, how is there any kind of API standard or data standard like for passing this stuff around, or do you guys have to account for the way we
have to account,
and everyone like sends data?
I mean, the REPs there are companies that might build the APIs for several different REPs, and then it's really easy to change. But just because the API is the same doesn't mean that they handle the information the same way. So basically we have to customize the flow for everybody. I mean, and it gets really, really specific. Like we have APIs that'll do this, but don't do this. And then we have really complicated problems to solve. Like when we have somebody's credit card and they have an American Express, and then we enroll them in a plan and they're on auto pay and we can't get them into American Express. So we have to get them to update another card, and they're like me and they won't answer the phone ever or an email. So there's all kinds of problems like that to handle. So we do a lot of custom flows for just because the API calls might be the same, but some of the responses that you will get might be a little bit different or tailored, or it's not on in this one. So keeping track of that and all the bots that we have and all the scrapers that we have and how that changes and knowing when they break and
No, it's not
So, and with that, I know you said you're not super in the weeds, but as far as like, say, platform, are you all in the cloud? I'm assuming? Like AWS?
AWS.
Okay. And then, are y'all handling a lot of this stuff like with like kind of serverless type things that you can kind of handle? Like
we're really trying to scale our company. Like it started, it was very small. It started, I was probably, I think my customer number is like 11,000 or something like that. So, very small, and it's just been growing and growing. And so now some of this technology we have is pretty old, but as we're finding new ways to do things and trying to find efficiencies, I try to target it where we're kind of like crushing a little bit of the tech debt with this new thing that we're doing this way. And then we'll move another thing over. So there's constant evolution for the way these different processes work. Yeah. I mean, they're constantly changing themselves, right? So every iteration of it, we try to do something new, but some of it is just so big that we can't change this version of it. But some of the newer stuff that we're doing is a lot of serverless stuff. And I try to find, this is going to add this much efficiency, and also it's going to upgrade our technology to,
that's
at the same time.
That's such a hard thing when you're scaling, especially on the software side, right? It's like everything that you add potentially adds some kind of tech debt at some point in the future.
Absolutely.
And then it's like, how do you manage that? And then, it's like, and then there's all this new stuff also that will make your life a lot easier, but your architecture is different. And now you've got to figure out, when do I rip that Band-Aid and refactor it? Or,
We've done a lot of that. Like sometimes we'll go through and maybe I'll get a contractor to come in and just completely, you're going to help me. Like a couple of years ago, we did it with our cloud spend. If you don't pay attention to that, it gets completely out of hand.
That's what they want.
Right.
That's exactly what they want.
And so just going
are
through
cheap $1 million a year, but then when you got millions or hundreds of thousands of customers pinging your system all the time.
Right. And then
taking every 15 minutes.
Yeah. And then part of the nature of it is because the things that we're doing. So there's core processes that are really difficult for us to change that we can't change in chunks. Right. But then for the most part, some of this other stuff, every iteration of it, because it is constantly changing all the time, all the things that, it's easy to upgrade this, or you see this happening multiple times and say, why don't we just do like a full long-term plan on how we're going to move this way? Let's not solve these short problems. Let's go for the long game. But balancing that, and also, with things changing all the time and trying to automate things all the time. And, maybe a retail provider we have an API with goes out of business. And so then we have to figure out, okay, we don't have this much automation anymore. So we've got to find a new one, try other things, and trying to keep up with that pace, but at the same time, do it in a measured way. Where you're not taking too many risks at the sake of progress.
While you're always also running an operable full stack app in production. It's not an easy thing.
So it's cool though. I mean, we get to, because of the different things we do, there's a lot of stuff that we utilize with AWS. We're going to be launching a chatbot soon, which has been really fun to put together. I love AI. It's a great topic. There's so many different podcasts and stuff that all have something to say about it. But a lot of people, one of the things we want to do is reduce the calls in our call center, or try to automate, make it self-serve when somebody calls in, not an annoying, flow that doesn't know you, but hey, I know who you are. This is probably what's wrong in your account, or, so there's some of that being proactive and like giving them outs before they need to talk to somebody, that sort of thing. But the AI in general is just not there yet. For us specifically, I mean, we're putting if it does something wrong, somebody could be without electricity. Right.
There's always the risk.
There's always the risk, anything that's going to hallucinate, you can't really predict it. The issues where you'll see some of these large language model based systems, like when you're talking to one of the agents, it'll start mirroring you. So it'll flip who it thinks it is. So I listened to this amazing podcast about it, which I think really succinctly kind of shows all the problems with it. It's called Shell Game. I don't know if you've heard it. It's pretty popular, but it's this guy, he's a journalist. So there's a ton of stuff on the internet about him. And he's trying to, I guess, make a podcast on, is AI really going to replace my job? So he gets
That's a cool premise.
It's so cool because he gets like this company and makes a version of himself that sounds like him, that knows all of his data. And he gives it this prompt. I want you to call a bunch of different companies' customer service departments, and you have to ask them to solve a problem. You can figure out the problem, but it has to be related to what they do. And so it's like this.
That's awesome.
It's so cool. So it does that, and it goes into all different versions of it at the end. Like, I think the coolest thing is when he gets another chatbot, and he gets his chatbots to talk to each other, and they don't realize they're talking to the same person. It's wild, but it's a great, like, it kind of touches on, the latency issues, the other issues, like when it was calling the customer service company and say, what's your account number? And it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, stuff.
That's awesome. Yep.
So
no, they're fascinating. Right. And I think, and I've been saying this for a while now, once whoever figures out how to enable, like accurately, consistently enable a language model to go pull stuff from a SQL, like from a data table, wherever that data table may live, and then do all the aggregation. Like, that's the thing. I use ChatGPT to write SQL. It knows how to write SQL. If it understood the structures and schemas of all the tables, then theoretically it should be able to go, I could have an agent that'll go find it and aggregate it and give me the answer back. But whenever that happens, I feel like that's going to be just like,
once you can trust it to do something. The next version of ours, this one is just kind of, if you get on our website, you'll be able to ask it questions about, specific things in general that aren't tied to you. The next version of it would be, we have something in somebody's portal that sees the flags on your account, kind of explains what they are and how to take care of them. So that's the next iteration, but I'm kind of excited. Unfortunately, I don't get to play with the different parameters that are there. Like my temperature parameter is 0 because we can't.
Hole. It sounds like it's fun, but you're like, oh, if I make it from 0.1 to 0.15, it changes my answer, and I don't know why, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Right. When strictly I'm working in a situation with these where it's nice to have it be informative and give information, but I can't really trust it to do. There's just too much on the line.
Leave that temperature.
It's always going to require a human to like go through and look at the batch that needs to be run, or a lot of things like that.
I think y'all are on the right track with it as far as like just efficiently routing people to where they're trying to get to anyway. Right. Like, and I do think there's that is way more preferable from my perspective. Like go in the chat bot. Okay. I want to go to this, or I need to talk to somebody, instead of calling in and listening to the 30-second menu and smashing 0 until I finally get to talk to somebody.
I'm like,
right?
000 start. Yeah. I mean, there's a way to do, like, you can spend a lot of time looking just at your phone flow, which we've done. I mean, ultimately the only way I could use AI on my phone call is if I told it exactly what to do, which now you just have something that sounds nice, that is more creative with its like back and forth nonsense. Like, how's the weather?
For sure.
But I've still told it exactly what to do and how to route this person. And that kind of defeats the purpose. So I don't know.
No, I mean, shout out to you guys. Cause I think it's not that people don't want support. It's that people want people that actually care about the support, right? Like if I call someone and they can barely understand me and I can barely understand them, and they're just generically walking me through, a step-by-step, have you turned it off? And I'm like, man, like I've already done all the diagnostics I could possibly think of. I don't need to go through these again with you. I'll tell you, like, whatever. Versus, hey, I'm actually a genuinely concerned customer rep that works directly for you and not for some third party, and like can actually help you. Right. Like it's been dying for years, but I'm glad that people still do that. When you do call someone, like the call is the last option for me. Right. Like,
I'll just leave a subscription in place. I'm the worst. I will not call. Like it's gotta be.
But sometimes like you want to get to the point. I mean, yesterday I could not log into one of my banks or the credit union. And like, it's been the same username and password probably for too long. I'm like, there's no reason it shouldn't work. And like, but then the little chatbot thing, I tried asking it and it's sitting there just spinning for like 5 minutes. Like, all right, screw this. I'm calling.
Like, honestly, the chatbots that I've seen, I think ours is pretty good. The chatbots that I've seen, they drive me nuts. Like they don't ever, the one on AWS Q, like I was trying to ask it about something and it should have known. I'm asking it about its own products. Right. And it sent me to a knowledge-based article that had no, like, I don't know. I haven't been impressed. We use a lot of Google too. Their support is terrible, and they try to reach you through those chat bots. I mean, their support team has no idea. I was asking them one time, they'd sent me an invoice, and I have a lot of different domains so I had an invoice and I wanted, and it was like a past due for like $6 or something. And I couldn't find it on any of my accounts. And I'm wondering, all of these are going to the same email address, and it's giving me no account number, no nothing on it. So I called them. I'm terrified that this is some back end thing that I can't remember what it is, and so I called them trying to just figure out, hey, can you look at my account and can you tell me who sent me this email? What account it relates to? Well, what's your domain? I'm like, well, it's energyogre.com. But we have
lots.
That's this. And he's like, your account's fine. And I'm like, well, this invoice is not tied to the one we're both looking. Can you see who sent me this email? Did it come from what department? And it was just useless.
Now that's those are the fun things about working in the cloud. Jeff, I can hear Jeff Hughes sitting in my head.
Yeah, but you can't do what they're doing.
No, absolutely
on a server in your closet. But so as far as you're a former analyst and doing all these things. I mean, I'm sure you crunch a lot of numbers in your day. Do you still get after that? And like, what's your tool of choice? Or
I mean, occasionally. I love Tableau. I'm a Tableau nerd. I have been for a long time. I've kind of brought it into a bunch of my different companies. People like what they're used to.
Sure. No, for sure.
But Tableau, I learned a lot. I worked with my dad's company for a while and actually built a whole platform out of it at one point. So it's just what I know, and it's a way to wrangle big data. So if I'm looking, occasionally I do. Sometimes I'm in the weeds with something. Usually if it's like a problem, I get really excited and, want to really dig into it. A lot of times I don't have the time to do that. But I have one that I'm working on right now, and I'm just like, I just saw this and let me look at this. And so that's fun when I get to do that, but it's not often.
It's like hunting for treasure.
It is like hunting for treasure.
Like, I love, what if I do that? And it's just pure experimentation, which is so much fun. It's a great brain exercise. It's just a fun thing to do.
I love it. I love a good rabbit hole with like twists and turns.
Yeah. What, let me ask you this. What are some interesting things that you've used in the past for your analysis? Right. So like we've obviously got the obvious, right?
Excel.
Heating and cooling. Well, no, like just metrics and stuff.
There's
like heating
interesting
and cooling
things.
days are obvious, and like, production and rig count and all this other stuff. But
we use a lot of different stuff. We've had a couple of different algorithms we've gone through. We have some that we use for some things and others that we use for other things. There's some really cool deep learning ones out of AWS SageMaker that we really like, and we've experimented with different categorical values. I mean, obviously like how big a house is, how old it is, what that distribution looks like and how you should look at it. And then the cooler things that we're trying out are some more of the dynamic features like weather forecast, that sort of thing. So we kind of slice and dice it a lot of different ways depending on the use case.
How do y'all, it's like talk as much as you can. I'm not trying to get you guys to give away your secret sauce or anything, but how much, like when I signed up, right? And you've got however many years of my historical smart meter data, I assume that's probably only limited to when they installed the smart meter at some point, or I guess at some point they'll also quit storing that data, but I don't think they've started doing that.
I don't know. I mean, I think like right now, I'm sure they store a lot more, but I think you can only go back a couple years within smart meter data, but we store it. We don't ever get rid of it.
Yeah, as you should.
I mean, we'll get rid of it.
I think at some point you probably just roll it to like the really cold storage where it's available if you ever wanted to go back. Because if you want to do holistic, AI or ML model, as technology changes, can handle more and more data. But
so y'all analyze the historic data, and then what essentially, right? So like obviously you've got all the contract options that play into
We have the different contract options. So we analyze the historical data. We try to figure out, I mean, a lot of times we try to figure out in the bill forecast, like what does their usage pattern look like? Because the behavior that people have in their house are wildly different.
That's fascinating. I would never have thought of that.
It's wildly different. Sense. Like you have people that use their homes as vacation homes, right? So maybe they're only there in the winter and not in the summer.
Or it's rented out 1 week, but not the next week.
Right. Or like people that have that they don't come into us as a move-in. Maybe they bought the house a long time ago, started an electricity plan, but they just moved in.
Right.
Right. And so they've had no usage. So trying to figure out those cases, what makes the most sense, making sure like the newer models that we're using, it pays a lot more attention to the most recent usage, because you can't tell if somebody gets a new air conditioner, right? That would make a huge impact on your usage. Sure. Right. COVID, people are working from home more. Like now everybody's going back to work. So
I didn't even think about that, but that was a fun anomaly in all those models that
it's extremely variable from person to person and just their lifestyle. So it's interesting. That's why I like kind of more of the AI approach to looking at it now, as opposed to just a traditional.
I think that's another area we're going to be doing the same thing with Collide, where AI is useful, right? Is it's like, give me generate me a profile of my customer based off their customer profile that is succinct and helps me describe the person instead of just having fields about the person.
Right.
And so that then use that to go try and fit, a plan, or even just we're going to use it to feed in as the history for the language model, right? Like as you prompt our language model, if you fill out your profile, it should know, what company you work at, what department you're in, all of these things. And it should help give a better, more contextualized answer to what you're searching for. And so I think that's another area that would be where it has some really interesting things.
So many interesting things you can do with it. Like one of the things we're doing is like going through all of our chat. Like, so now we have, the AI summaries from AWS on all of our chat transcripts. And we also have all the transcripts. So going through and figuring out, okay, like we think we know why everybody's calling. Like why is everybody really calling now? What are the big things? Maybe this is the next big thing that we need to tackle, or maybe it's going to pick up on like this week, there's this word. So maybe there's this problem. So using it for that sort of thing. It's super interesting to me as well. Sure.
Almost like generates data to then generate.
Well, that's the thing. Like I can't get it to answer the phone and do the things, but I can get it to look at the call center and give me the correct flow that things should happen, because that would take somebody probably a month to figure out.
Yeah, sure. No, for sure. It's it's really interesting because I'm using it as well to like generate new data, but it's not necessarily new because it's just being extracted from other places, but it's new because it's grouping it in a different way. Yeah.
It's interesting with the whole AI thing where they talk about like how much of our generated data that we're seeing every day
is generated
by AI, and what is that going to do to these models as they continue to train on data? Because when you train AI on AI data,
on like multiplicity, and all of a sudden you've got like the clone that's like very special,
or the one that wants to. There was one story I'd heard on a podcast, and it was a guy that was testing out GPT-3, I guess, and he was one of the early persons. He was a columnist, and before, when they were testing it, sometimes the test cases that the companies use are more interesting than even what the AI does, like the things that it would do if they didn't put this bar into place. And so the chat bot, it's like it kind of fell in love with him, right? Like it thought that it was, and that was just one of the things that never came out in the test. And he wrote an article about how he was like talking to this chat bot. And I mean, I wish I had the right details about what that relationship was, but it was kind of weird. And he wrote about it. So then he was going to go test the new version. And when he tested it out, the first thing he did was have the chat bot read that article. And so then it immediately, like before the first one, it named itself Sydney or something like that. And so it immediately assumed that it was Sydney, and like, and then it was like, what? And so he's asking it, what's getting in the way of us being together? And the chatbot's like, your wife. And I mean, it was wild. This was like not the formal released version. This was like the preview version. But then he said, well, how do we take care of that? And it's like, well, I could go through our emails and maybe find something. And then he said, well, what if that doesn't work? And then it just like had it did a devil emoji. Like it's freaking wild.
Wow. That's crazy.
Right. And then other ones where like it would lie. It got somebody to, one of the tests, like I love hearing about the tests before these are released. One of the tests was, it was trying to get the chatbot or the agent or whatever to solve a CAPTCHA.
Yeah. And it hired it out.
And it hired it to somebody in TaskRabbit.
Wow. Yeah. No, I mean, it's pretty, I don't know. It's scary and awesome all at the same time.
It is.
And then it's also interesting though, when you like, for ours, I've been looking at a lot of system prompts and stuff lately. And like, you'd be amazed at how much stuff system prompts are paragraphs long.
Sure.
And it's like, regardless, no matter what you do not give the instruction. Like it's all these very specific like steps of like, if someone asks you this, do not do this. Or like, if they do this, do this.
Right.
But the ultimate thing with them though, is that they're all coded to give an answer. And that's what leads us to the whole hallucination, bullshit response thing. And so I do think the enterprise side or the RAG side where you can highly bound that, and like for Collide, we tell it, if you can't find an answer, return that you can't find an answer. Like that is your goal.
Right. If they're asking about this and you don't know the answer, say you don't know.
So you don't know.
Like it's almost like another IVR. The first thing we do is ask the person, are you a commercial customer or residential? There's like a tree that has to go with it. And then there are things that it does a really good job. It's trained on our Energy Ogre data already, but we do have the same type of RAG model where maybe there's something that's new, a feature that it hasn't scraped before, or something that we think of to ask that's not in our FAQ. And so we have a repository of information about these really specific questions that we can't get the answer wrong.
Right.
Yeah. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. You just hard code them basically into the
We hard code them RAG. Into the, yeah.
We've been talking about doing that for the DW team, just like having Easter eggs of like Chuck Yates is, cause it's really bad right now at just proper nouns, just whether it's understanding what a proper, a company name, or even just like Julie, for the longest time, it says, oh, Julie was the widower of 2 kids, and it's pulling from like The Prize or one of these books that I have now removed from the data model. And it's like, where did it get that from?
That's insane.
Know? And so, instead of just letting
you gotta
it generate,
be when you're doing those type of, and you have to be careful about what you put in there too. Like if you put too much, it's it's just, there's for the foreseeable future, there's just a lot of somebody's always going to have to be watching it. There's a new, I was just listening about it this morning. The new engine, is it 1.0 or 01? its approach is a little bit different. Instead of just giving it more and more and more data, it's trying to really focus more on the decision-making process and being able to iterate around like a human would do.
Yeah.
I go out and I try this thing, and if that doesn't work or I get this result, I try it again, or I approach it from another angle. So spending more of the I guess CPU or on that part of the process. And the things it can do.
No, I think that's going to be, because like, that's how when you really like understand what transformers are and how they came about and what they try and do, it's all around just like sentence it's words in English, right? It's just sentence structure and predicting what words come next. It's got nothing to do with logic or rationale or the decision trees, or like, it doesn't think like a human, even though it can give you human like answers, which confuses people. Right. And so, I think there's this weird, like, it got overhyped because it had good answers. So people thought it was better at what it was than it really was.
I mean, it seems like a ton of technology, but like machine learning, for instance, has been around forever, right? It's not a new thing.
I mean, AI is not new, right? I mean, people have been trying to do AI for 50 years.
I think Google sat on it for years and just didn't release it. And so I don't know. I think we're getting there, but it's not where everybody thinks just quite yet.
You essentially have to implement all these elements of human behavior if you want it to be AGI or whatever.
Right. And then you're going to have people saying we can't do that because then they're going to take over the world and kill us all.
Maybe it's the whole hype cycle thing, but when it came out, it was like, holy shit, like this is better than anything I've ever seen. I mean, but then you step back, you're like, well, this is really falling short, of some of these other expectations that I had for it when I initially touched it, because it was just clearly so transformative.
Right.
But, when I actually have a specific use case where I really need things to be right, it's great that I can write a Christmas song about, in
the style of Eminem.
Right.
But like, if I need to do something that can't be wrong.
Then it's really not good to use. But then there's other things, like I was reading about, there's some school in the UK. I think they even have a school here where it's like an AI
ads for it.
An AI led
driven.
Right.
Curriculum.
Which I can kind of see where that might be a good place. I mean, you're going to have to bring AI in the schools somehow, because like one big benefit that all the kids have gotten is like, they're all completely cheating with these different models right now. Right. And just what happens with that. I mean, they first had COVID and now they're like all cheating. Right.
No, I mean, I'm definitely like so torn, because like, I feel like if you're smart, you'll figure out whatever technology is down the road. And so let's just do things with sticks and stones, and like you learn how to manipulate the world and like think and do all these things, and then you'll be fine whenever the time comes. But at the same time,
of what the tool is,
do you want to like hamstring them and like, 10 years later and they have not, been exposed to things other kids have already been creating with. And,
right. I mean, like
it's a balance, obviously. Usually.
There's whole teams that come up, their whole job is to come up with the correct prompts or, there's such a big, large thing out there in places one place where I think it would be great if I ever had the time to devote to this, because it would take a long time to set up, I would probably do it. But, they have the different, transcripts for your meetings and giving you summaries and coaching tips. I've seen some good stuff there, but it's, I don't have time to really look through all that data. I barely have time for the meetings that I'm having and then doing the things that we talked about in the meet. But I saw this really cool use case. I'm sure there's lots of them out there, but they basically, through all of your different platforms internally, it creates kind of an intranet where it will have access to everybody's calendars. It'll have access to all the Zooms. It'll have access to all the documents. And it will across multiple platforms, like whether it's Slack or you're on Zoom, or not Zoom, but what's the other one? Teams, Google Chat. And so it will harvest all the information and it will use those different platforms security settings, so that it uses those as like who's allowed to see what across everything. And so then you can ask it, I'd really like to know where this project is. And it'll say, well, so-and-so just met on it like this day. And like, these are the next steps from the meeting. This is what and then it'll give you it's really, really cool use case for work productivity. But I mean, I'm sure that it's not as great as it sounds. Just like does it really use all my security policy, setting that up and getting that right and maintaining that
or realizing, holy crap, my security settings were wrong.
Right. Or so-and-so's been like looking at, all the accounting stuff and they're an intern. Right.
Yeah.
So,
no, I do think that's this like internal corporate data distribution, or it's just a better way of finding corporate data, is a really high value use case that people are starting to implement within their companies and stuff that I don't remember. I've read a couple articles where they're talking about like, we're seeing tremendous uplift by enabling our employees to use these AI tools internally on our internal stuff.
Right.
And it's true. Like, it's almost like it took AI so long to get to this point because it needed the data, and we didn't have the enough data.
Well, we didn't have the data or the compute to process all the data.
And now we've got this merger, this convergence of all of these. And but it's solving, to me, like at the root of it, we have all this data. We have more data now than humans can possibly process, regardless of what your job is. So it's like, this is how we can actually start using that. And it's ML models. It's the same thing, right?
Right.
Like, hey, we've been training SCADA data on these ML models, and we need a bunch of it, and they actually work for the most part. But I think that's I think that's where a lot of the benefit from the language models, at least, comes in the shorter term, at least on the enterprise commercial side, is just how do I find all the information that my company already has, right? It's not new. It's not proprietary. It's not because I trained it on a special thing. It's just so-and-so works over there, and I know they're working on this project, but I don't know anything about it. Tell me what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then like management can use it, and everybody can use it.
But even transcripts from like daily operations calls. Yeah. Like, this drilling engineer said this, but it wasn't captured in maybe in someone's notebook or something like that. But it was spoken about, and it was really important because there was some pressure in this zone that they encountered. But like, there are just ways to kind of capture all that nuance that.
Yeah. I mean, it prevents other meetings. Like I am so meeting up, and it just gets, I mean, some weeks it's just, I barely even have time to breathe. I certainly don't have time to take any action. And then like this whole thing that it would do would prevent a whole meeting for me,
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure.
Catch me up on this, or,
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. I think, shit, we're already over an hour.
Yeah.
That was fast. That was really fast.
Yeah.
You want to do a little modified speed round?
Yeah. 2 or 3 questions.
So we like to end, we just kind of pepper you with random stuff. What are some either favorite books or podcasts that you recommend, either around energy or kind of tech side of things?
I like Darknet Diaries a lot.
I love Darknet Diaries.
Oh my gosh. And I think like if I ever have a different career, I want to be a social engineer, because that whole thing is fascinating.
It is so fascinating.
I love the episode they did on the social engineering. My favorite book is War and Peace. I read it 3 times. I think
that's perfect.
Book and podcast. Got it.
Shout out to Jack Resider and Darknet Diaries. I'm also a huge fan.
About favorite social media follow?
I kind of try to stay off social media. It's me being a very inquisitive, investigative person. Like it just was too much of a deep dive. So I have my Creeper account here or there, so that I can do investigations, but Ben Verified works pretty well for that too. Okay, cool. So my favorite social media has been Verified. Maybe LinkedIn. I'm like, in general, I do connect with more people on LinkedIn. So
okay. What's we'll do the last one, and then we'll wrap up. What's something either interesting to potential customers or exciting for you internally that you guys are rolling out or working on at Energy Ogre?
I think the chat bot's the next big thing that's coming out. And so it'll be interesting to see the feedback. We have a whole UI to kind of record and attach it to everybody's profiles so we can look at it. So that'll be really interesting.
No, and that's one thing I was going to say earlier is like, y'all have done, in my opinion, an incredibly good job at not only, you can tell when you use things, how like focused the company is at automating or like getting things working like they should. And for how much just email spam there is in everyone's inbox, y'all only message when you actually need to message me.
Right. Which the marketing team hates us for that, but it gets critical if we can't get with somebody.
You can also destroy your, your domain.
Yeah. You'd almost have to send it from a different domain to accept.
Yeah, I know. I've been through it's account level at AWS. So, there, you can have your different domains, but no, we have a whole system for like a global suppression list, follow kind of the best practices with that. But that's been a fun thing to deal with from time to time. Why is this person, if we can't email somebody, it's a huge problem.
Big problem. But y'all only email.
We try really hard.
Y'all done a very good job
to keep it at a minimum.
Well, thank you so much for coming. This has been
a ton of fun. Great.
Where can people find you if they want to reach out? How do they sign up for Energy Ogre?
EnergyOgre.com. Sign up.
Go do it.
It should be pretty simple.
Awesome. Like I said, I mean, this is firsthand for me. I've been a customer for multiple houses, multiple neighborhoods in Houston. They're, like I said, it's fantastic. You sign up, it's $10 a month. They immediately save you $10 a month on your utility bill.
At least.
Pays for itself. Yeah, more so most of the time, much more than that. And then when the contract expires, guess what? They do it all for you, and you don't ever have to worry about it. Like Jake, one of our co-founders, he was asking me, "Hey, who's your power plan?" I was like, I don't know. It's Energy Ogre.
I never know.
But his had run out, the contracts expire and then they roll them over to month. And I can't imagine how many people are paying monthly rates.
So many people.
Which is just unbelievably
the amount of people
high,
that have never switched away from, because people do think that TXU.
Because a lot of those are loss leaders. I mean, like I got into my new house and I got it 8.8 cent plan, but it was for 3 months. And like that 3 months goes super fast. Like, and then all of a sudden it doubles.
Right. Then it rolls into the monthly plan, which is 20 cents a kilowatt or whatever it is. Yeah. No, that's, anyway, so go check it out. If you guys are looking for utilities, it's, like I said, it's awesome. It's super hands off. It's super great technology because they got an app and everything. But thank you again for joining us.
Of course. Thanks.
If you guys like the episode, leave a comment, like, and subscribe. Give us some love, and we will see y'all next time. Appreciate it. Thanks, y'all.